Hi everyone, Tasha here, and welcome to day 6 of INKtoberfest. Today we're going to create a few cards using items from Maker Forte and featuring the new color Hive Snow Flurries Pigment Ink. This ink is fantastic for all sorts of fun projects, and we're going to share some of the techniques today. For the first card, we're going to use white cardstock and the Dutch Village silhouetted stamp set from Maker Forte. I'm going to stamp this image with Color Hive ink in the color Vegas Strip. It's a beautiful shade of blue. And I will stamp it several times just to make sure that the image is nice and dark. This first technique that we're doing is going to change the color of our stamped image by using white on top of an ink color. So I'm just stamping it again, making sure I press down firmly all over so that we have the stamped design fully covered with the ink. After I cleaned off the stamp really well, but I wanted to make sure I didn't transfer any of the blue ink onto my new white stamp pad, so I'm using a blending brush just to pounce the white color on. And you see the coverage this white pigment ink gives? It covers that stamp so nicely. Now I'm just going to go over and stamp again. This is where having a stamping tool comes in handy because you don't have to try lining everything up again. And here's how it looks with the color on top, the white on top of the color. So the first example is just stamped with the Vegas strip, and the second example has the white pigment ink on top. And here's a completed card. The next technique, we're going to use a stencil and stencil the design onto black cardstock. This is great for using like a snowflake or any type of stencil, but I think snowflakes works really well because they're going to show up with all that detail onto black, or you could use another dark cardstock. So I just went over to my craft board, and then I'm going to use my blending brush again to just blend the white pigment ink all over those snowflake images or those snowflake cutouts. You're just going to go over everything and make sure everything is covered. If you wanted more of an ombre look, you could either add different colors if it was a lighter paper, or you could just layer on more white and then kind of gradually use less white to give a different look. Once I was done, I'm going to remove my magnets and gently pull up the stencil. This is pigment ink, so it does take a little bit to dry. You can speed up the drying process by using your heat gun or just set it aside. But do you notice all of the detail and how those snowflakes just pop against the black background? For the next technique, we're going to stamp with the white pigment ink onto black cardstock. I'm using a stamp from the Maker Forte Wrapped Christmas Sentiment stamp set, and I'm just going to use my Misty tool again to stamp a greeting right onto black cardstock. This again, I can use my Misty to stamp several times to make sure that those letters are nice and bright, but really this ink works perfectly on stamping this sentiment. This is another technique you can do in place of embossing. Once I was done with my snowflake project, we're going to do another technique of ink blending a background and then layering pigment ink with a stencil on top. So I'm going to use several shades of Color Hive ink. I'm using Blueberry Cheesecake, Blue Raspberry, and Pit Stop Pink Color Hive ink. So I'm just going to blend all of these colors on the white cardstock, just making sure everything is covered. It doesn't have to be perfect, you just want to layer on that color. After, I'm using my blending brush again and just making sure it has a whole bunch of ink on that brush because you don't want to go back and ink up again. And we're just going to pounce the color all over these circle openings. This is going to give a really cool effect because as you're doing this, the white is kind of blending with the Color Hive ink in the background. So you're going to have this pretty pastel look to the background design. Once you have all of your design with the white covered, you can lift up your stencil and move the circles around. If you want to add more circles or different size circles, you can do that as well. But remember, don't put your blending brush back onto that white pigment ink pad because you don't want to transfer any of the color to the bright white ink. After I was done, I did go around the edges and just kind of softened up the edges with the extra ink on my brush, and it gave just the prettiest color. This pastel shades they're just so pretty, and they're going to look great on a holiday card. Next, we're moving on to a technique of doing something similar that we did on our project with the snowflakes, but we're going to emboss this time. So again, I'm taking black cardstock and then a greeting. And this greeting is from the Maker Forte Build a Modern Christmas stamp set. I'm using my Misty tool again, and I'm going to stamp up the Ho 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 greeting 2 times with the white pigment ink. This way it's nice and bright on that cardstock, but instead of letting it dry, I'm going to put some clear embossing powder on top and then hit it with my heat gun. You can use clear embossing powder on top of your stencil designs as well, but just having that clear on top, you don't have to wait for it to dry, and it has that nice raised effect. Here's a completed project. The next technique, we are going to stamp with white pigment ink on top of another color. This is similar to the stencil design where we added the circles on top of the blended background. So I'm using a piece of craft paper, and you can use any type of paper that you want for this. And I'm just going to use my Misty again. This is going to be a coffee themed card, and I'm going to be using the stamp set from Maker Forte called Have a Beautiful Day, along with the add-on set. It's called Iced Baby. So I'm stamping the coffee outline or the coffee mug outline with Color Hive Eclipse Black ink, and this ink is perfect for this type of project. It's nice and dark, and it has a really great coverage with only having to stamp it 1 time. I just love Color Hive inks, and this black is one of my favorites. Once I had that inside or that coffee mug outline stamped, I'm going in with the round circle, the coffee kind of part of this design, and I'm using Color Hive ink in the color Flat White, and this is actually a really nice tan color. We are using tan paper, but this ink is just a little bit darker, so it looks like you have a coffee beverage inside of your mug. Now we're going to be using our white pigment ink to add the detail on top. The detail is from the Iced Baby add-on set, and this will give one of those latte or coffee house type of design on top of your coffee mug opening. So I'm going in and again stamping it with my Misty tool, just making sure I press down firmly so that all of that design comes across. It is kind of light, you can leave it as is, or you could stamp it again. So I did go in and stamp it 1 more time just to make sure it was nice and dark. This one has a lot of detail, so having it stamped twice, I just like the look of it, but you could stamp it once just to have a lighter look. So here's how it looks all stamped up, and you see all the detail shows up with this pigment ink. It's just beautiful. And here's a close-up of my card that I created with this design. I love how it looks with the added heart. For the next technique, we're going to use the Maker Forte Love is the Flower stamp set. We're going to be stamping the large image included in this set, which has a flower and then a greeting all in one. I'm using my Misty tool again, and I'm going to be using the same Color Hive black ink to stamp this greeting 2 times. We're going to be embossing this greeting and then using the pigment ink to color in the petals. This gives a really nice whitewash look, and I think it's a nice easy way to color in the flower when you're stamping onto colored cardstock. So I'm going to stamp this greeting 2 times. I wanted to make sure that it was fully covered and had enough ink for the clear embossing powder to stick to it. So again, using your MISTI tool or any type of stamping tool really helps for these type of techniques, so you don't have to worry about your stamp not lining up if you have to re-ink. After I was done stamping, I just added some clear embossing powder. I did make sure it was fully covered. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but once the embossing powder is covered, it does have a lighter look to it, so you know if you missed any areas. Afterwards, I'm just going to go in with my heat gun and heat set the whole area. And once it's all done, it looks great as is. And do you see all the detail in the sentiment? And I love that flower design. So now to do the whitewash effect or look, we're going to take just a stamping block and then some of that pigment ink, and I'm just going to press it down just to get some color on my block. I'm going to use my water paintbrush and just squeeze some of that water out. And you can squeeze as much water as you want. If you want it to be a lighter whitewash, just add more water. If you want it to be really bright and white, like I'm going to do right here, you just add a little water and then it'll show up on your paper darker or brighter. But again, that's all up to you. So you see how easy it is? You just pick up some of the ink and then you're just going to spread it around those petals. You can also go over the petals again. So just let it dry a little bit and you can touch up where you missed. Again, if you wanted to start out with it to be darker, you can test that out. If you wanted it to be lighter, just add more water and then that'll give a really light effect where you can see the color from the cardstock show through. The only thing you have to remember about this technique is that it needs time to dry. So make sure that you set it aside to dry or use your heat gun before touching these petals. But I love the way this look turned out. Here's an example of the card we just created using that color, the white color on top of the ink. And here is where we did our stenciling on top of the colored background and then our embossed ho ho ho. Next we have our coffee themed card where we layered on the white color on top of ink color. And this again is such a cool and easy way to make your stamped cards. Then we have this really fun looking snowflake Christmas card. I love this one so much, where you have the stencil design onto black cardstock and then you have your stamping right onto black cardstock. And I did add little crystals or little Maker Forte crown jewels to the center of some of the snowflakes to add more sparkle. I just love that card. And then we have our whitewash or painted petals on top of the embossed sentiment and flower. I hope you enjoyed all of the projects we made today and enjoyed seeing a peek at the new Color Hive Snow Flurries Pigment Ink. All the items used are in the description box below, and I hope you're enjoying Inktoberfest. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.